There were still 5 minutes before the train departed. James Carter had settled into his seat, opened his bag, and taken out his book. Before he began reading, he stared out the window for a while. He watched the rush of people trying to catch the train, and those waving goodbye to their loved ones with tears in their eyes. After a difficult year in his professional life, the idea of escaping everything and going on a small trip alone filled him with excitement. The moment he moved on to the second line of his book, it slipped from his hands. A woman, with her back turned, had bumped into him while trying to sit in the seat across from him. After a brief moment of surprise, James picked up his book and stared at her, as if expecting an apology. The woman adjusted her puffy skirt, turned around, and sat down, completely unaware of what had just happened. James's annoyed expression changed the moment he saw her face. He was looking at a beautiful young woman with wavy red hair, fair skin, and a delicate nose. Without thinking that it might be rude, he let his gaze travel over her, her slender, elegant neck adorned with a floral scarf, the white lace blouse with a high collar and open front, the gentle curve of her chest beneath it, her slim waist, and her delicate legs visible beneath her knee-length skirt. When he realized she was looking at him, his face turned red. He quickly pretended to read his book, but his embarrassment was obvious. He couldn't focus at all. He read each line 3 or 4 times, occasionally letting his eyes drift toward the beautiful woman across from him like a mischievous child. The train had already started moving, but James still couldn't shake off the effect of her pure beauty. "I suppose you've only just learned how to read," the woman said. James looked at her with confusion and surprise. "Of course not. I graduated from the University of California," he replied proudly. "What makes you think that?" The young woman smiled sweetly. "You've been reading the same page for about 20 minutes. I've been watching you haven't turned a single page." James's face flushed even more. Had she noticed his glances? "Well, I was a bit lost in thought," he managed to say. "Clara Whitmore," she said, extending her hand. "James Carter, nice to meet you," he replied, taking her hand. The moment he touched her soft hand, his heart felt like it would leap out of his chest. He had flirted before, of course, but in front of Clara, he felt completely inexperienced. It was as if he didn't want that moment to end. His eyes were locked on hers as he felt the warmth and softness of her hand with his entire being. James put his book back into his bag, and soon they were immersed in a deep conversation like two friends who had known each other for years. When the train arrived at the station, James felt a quiet sadness that this beautiful moment was coming to an end. As they gathered their belongings and stepped off the train, Clara turned to him. "Why don't you come with us to the town?" she said. James's eyes lit up like a child who had just received a new toy. The moment Clara stepped off the train, she began to run. She threw her arms around a man in his 50s, with graying hair, broad shoulders, a slight belly, and kind, warm eyes. She hugged him tightly for a long moment. He was her father, Arthur Whitmore. Arthur had lost his wife when Clara had just turned 5. He had raised her alone in the town of Eureka Springs. He was a strong man, but also deeply devoted to his daughter. They owned one of the town's 2 bakeries. The other bakery was run by Sam, who constantly saw Arthur as a rival and tried to earn more than him. But Arthur simply did his job, and he did it with love. The customers believed that his dedication and love for his work made his bread taste better. And they were right. No one passing by the bakery could resist the delicious aroma. They couldn't go home without buying fresh bread. As James approached them slowly, almost like a timid deer, Arthur looked at him curiously. "This is James, Dad," Clara said. "Dad, this is James. We traveled together on the train. He's planning a small vacation in our town. He didn't have a plan after the station, so I invited him to come with us." Arthur looked the young man up and down. "Of course, my daughter," he said, though his tone carried a hint of caution. He had seen Clara go through a few small romances before, and after each one, he had witnessed how deeply she was affected. That was why he was always careful with any man who appeared in his daughter's life. They loaded the luggage into the small truck and set off. During the 2 months Clara had spent staying with her aunt, she had missed her town and her father's bakery dearly. Arthur's old truck climbed the rugged mountain roads with effort but determination. James watched the deep valleys, the tall pine trees, and a small waterfall flowing down a hillside with admiration, occasionally stealing glances at Clara. After a 2-hour journey, they entered the town. As they passed through the small town center filled with shops, Clara excitedly grabbed James's arm. "Look, that's our bakery," she said. Without asking any questions, Arthur pulled over in front of Mrs. Eleanor's boarding house. After all, there was no other place for tourists to stay in this town. This small 12-bed boarding house was never fully occupied. Sometimes, days would pass without a single guest. But Mrs. Eleanor, who was only 47 years old and had been abandoned by her husband for a younger woman, had no choice but to continue running it. Despite her age, she still managed to attract attention with her natural beauty. Her husband leaving her for a young woman he had met in the city had been the subject of gossip throughout the town for days, though it had slowly begun to fade from memory. As James politely thanked them, Arthur had already started the truck and driven off. James stood still, unable to move, until the truck disappeared around the corner. The sweet journey that had begun on the train had come to an end. With a slightly saddened expression, he stepped into the boarding house. After Mrs. Eleanor's kind welcome, he went up to his room, tossed his suitcase aside, and lay down on the bed. He replayed everything that had happened that day, over and over in his mind. Clara's eyes, her sweet smile, the way she spoke, her gestures, and that unique scent that felt as though she had been walking among jasmine and roses. James woke up early the next morning and quickly stepped outside. "I think we came from this direction. The bakery should be 2 streets away," he muttered to himself as he walked quickly. It didn't take long for him to find it. Without thinking about what to say or do, he walked straight inside. At that moment, Clara was wrapping bread for another customer. When she turned around, she looked at James in surprise. "Hello, that's early for someone on vacation," she said with a smile. She handed him a freshly baked pastry. James had now decided to go with the flow. He finished it in 2 bites. "That was honestly the most delicious pastry I've ever had," he said. "Can I get 3 for breakfast?" Clara prepared them and handed them to him with that same sweet smile. "How much do I owe you?" he asked. "No, it's okay. It's your first day, it's on us," she replied. James didn't know what to do anymore. He slowly made his way toward the door, feeling as if his steps had grown heavier. Just as he was about to leave, Clara called out to him, "If you want, I can show you around the town this afternoon." James's smile stretched from ear to ear. "I'd love that," he said. "Wait at the boarding house. I'll come by when I finish work," Clara added. James returned to the boarding house. He had breakfast with the tea Mrs. Eleanor offered and the pastries he had bought. Every few minutes, he found himself staring at the entrance door. Time seemed to move 10 times slower. He even began to think it had completely stopped for him. He couldn't remember how many cups of tea he had drunk while waiting. Just as Mrs. Eleanor was bringing him another cup, Clara walked into the boarding house. James jumped to his feet in excitement and accidentally bumped into Mrs. Eleanor, causing the tea to spill onto the floor. "I'm so sorry," he said, embarrassed. Mrs. Eleanor smiled, clearly understanding the reason for his excitement. "It's all right, James," she said gently. Clara showed James around the town, telling him short stories about each shop and house. James fell in love with this charming little town hidden within nature. In truth, he was falling in love with Clara. As they walked along the stone-paved streets like 2 lovers, Clara's expression suddenly darkened when she saw someone approaching Tommy. Tommy looked at them with surprise, but said nothing as he passed by. Tommy hurried straight to the market where Rick worked. Rick noticed his expression immediately. "What's wrong with you? Did something happen?" he asked. "Clara," Tommy managed to say. "What about Clara? Did something happen to her?" Rick grabbed him by the shoulders and shook him. Rick was deeply, obsessively in love with Clara, but Clara had never returned his feelings. Every attempt he made had failed, yet he couldn't let go. "I saw her with a man," Tommy finally said in a weak voice. Rick felt a sharp pain shoot through his head. "No, that can't be," he muttered. "The love of my life. She can't be with another man." As evening approached, the couple returned to the front of the boarding house after their walk. "If you want, we can go walking on the valley road tomorrow," Clara said. James didn't hesitate for a second. "I'd love that," he replied. Clara stepped a little closer and gently placed a small kiss on James's lips. That single second would become the most unforgettable moment of his life. But someone else had witnessed it. Rick. He was consumed by rage. He clenched his fist over and over again. All he wanted was to throw himself at James and kill him. Just as he was about to act, Tommy grabbed his arm. "Not now," he said. While James lay in his room, reliving the happiness of that kiss, Rick was elsewhere, making plans, dark, merciless plans. He imagined countless cruel scenarios. Clara, meanwhile, was at home, talking to her father about James, almost as if she wanted him to understand her feelings. "He's so kind, so thoughtful. I think he could even be a good father someday," she said. Arthur's face darkened. Clara noticed immediately and wrapped her arms around him. "Of course, after you," she added playfully. Arthur's expression softened instantly. It was impossible for him to stay upset while his daughter hugged him. This time, James didn't want to wait at the boarding house. He wanted to be close to Clara. He stood across the street from the bakery for 2 hours, waiting for her to finish work. When Clara came out and saw him, her eyes lit up. She ran toward him. "This time, we're going the other way," she said, linking her arm with his. James felt as if he were walking on clouds. He couldn't even feel his feet. "Is this what love feels like?" he thought as he breathed in Clara's scent. As they walked along the narrow paths of the valley, James suddenly stopped. He turned to her. No, I'm sure, with all my heart, I love you," he said. He lowered his head slightly and kissed her. Clara didn't feel the need to say anything. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment. She wrapped her arms tightly around him. Both of their hearts felt like they would burst from excitement. As they walked, they spoke about the future, about their love, their dreams, and the happy home they imagined together. When night began to fall, James walked Clara home. Before leaving, he leaned in and kissed her again, this time longer, deeper, filled with love. Arthur stepped outside. "Good evening," James said respectfully. Clara quickly went inside, and Arthur followed, closing the door with a slightly stern expression. James had found the love of his life. As he walked back to the boarding house, the town had grown quiet. The streets were empty. Everyone was at home with their families. Just one street away from the boarding house, a man suddenly appeared in front of him. "Rick." "Stay away from Clara," Rick said angrily. "You'll leave this town tomorrow." James didn't take him seriously. "That's none of your concern," he replied. At that moment, he noticed 2 more men appear behind him. So a fight is inevitable, he thought. He acted first, throwing a hard punch straight into Rick's face. Rick lost his balance and fell to the ground. Tommy and Kent immediately jumped on James, barely managing to hold him back. Rick got up and began punching James repeatedly. "Clara is mine. Stay away from her," he shouted, completely losing control. James struggled, but he was outnumbered. "No, never," he managed to say, before losing consciousness and collapsing to the ground. Even after he fell, Tommy and Kent kicked him a few more times. "Let's go, Rick. He's going to die," one of them said. They disappeared into the darkness. James lay there for hours until someone passing by noticed him. The man immediately carried him to Dr. Samuel, the town's only doctor. Samuel took one look at him. "We need to get him to the clinic immediately." James was still unconscious. At the small 4-bed clinic, Dr. Samuel examined him. His condition was critical. Taking him to a larger hospital in the city would be even riskier. Turning to the man who had brought him, Samuel said quietly, "The people who did this, they're not good men. They might try to hurt him again. Please, don't tell anyone about this." The man nodded and left. The next day, Clara went to the boarding house with excitement. But James wasn't there. As she was leaving, she ran into Tommy. "Are you looking for that traitor?" Tommy said coldly. Clara frowned. "What are you talking about? James?" "Yes. The one who was bragging in the bar last night about how he had charmed you, how he would enjoy himself with you until his vacation ended and then leave you." Clara froze. Tears began to stream down her face. For a brief moment, Tommy wanted to tell her the truth, but his loyalty to Rick held him back. Without saying another word, he turned and walked away quickly. Clara ran. 3 long days passed before James finally opened his eyes. His face was bruised, and 2 of his ribs were broken. He tried to sit up. "Clara," he groaned weakly. He collapsed back onto the bed. Nurse Margaret immediately called out, "Dr. Samuel, the patient is awake." The doctor rushed in and examined him again. "You're very lucky, son," Samuel said. "You were close to dying. You need to rest for a few more days. After that, you can leave." But James's mind was filled with only one thing, Clara. Helplessly, he spent 2 more days in that bed. The moment he left the clinic, he went straight to Arthur's bakery. But Clara wasn't there. Arthur looked at him with anger. "What are you doing here? Get out of my shop," he shouted. "Clara," James managed to say, "Clara is gone. She went to her aunt's. She's not coming back." James stood there in silence. He didn't understand anything. What had he done wrong? He walked out quietly. When he returned to the boarding house, he knew there was only one thing left to do: leave. He packed his belongings in silence. Before leaving, he told Mrs. Eleanor everything that had happened. With tears in his eyes, he spoke about his love for Clara, about how he had done nothing wrong, about how deeply he loved her. Eleanor listened without saying a word. James placed a small card on the table and left. More than 6 months had passed, but James still carried Clara in his heart as if it were the very first day. He wanted to return to the town to find her, but Arthur's words echoed in his mind. She's not coming back. Why hadn't he asked where her aunt lived? He was angry at himself. Each day passed with a new regret. Clara had returned to the town. As she walked through the streets, memories of her time with James flooded her mind, their walks, their conversations, their dreams. She felt both sadness and anger toward him. Rick approached her once again. "Can't you see how much I love you?" he said desperately. "Please, marry me." Clara looked at him. This time, she said yes. Rick was stunned. He had been expecting rejection. Instead, he felt like he was on top of the world. The wedding day arrived. Guests filled the venue. Clara stood quietly in a corner, watching them, her face filled with sadness. Mrs. Eleanor entered the hall gracefully, dressed elegantly. As she approached Clara to congratulate her, she noticed the unhappiness in her eyes. A sharp feeling struck her heart. James's words suddenly came back to her. Everything he had told her, the truth, and the card he had left behind. She had never looked at it. For 6 months, it had remained tucked away in her wallet. She hesitated. Should I tell her? She knew she had to listen to her heart. "Clara, there's something I should have told you a long time ago. Please forgive me for being so late." Clara looked at her, confused. Eleanor handed her the card. Clara opened it with trembling hands. I will wait for you for the rest of my life, Clara. Below it, an address. Tears streamed down her face. Without a word, she turned and ran out of the hall. Rick rushed after her and grabbed her arm. Where are you going? Please don't leave. This is supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. Clara pulled her arm away in one swift motion and kept walking. As she passed her father, she looked at him. I'm leaving, Dad. I'm going to James. Wearing her wedding dress, she walked out of the hall like a swan, under the stunned gazes of everyone around her. Rick stood there helplessly. He knew there was nothing he could do. He could never bring Clara back. One morning, James stepped out of his apartment on his way to work. As he slowly walked down the stairs, Clara was on his mind as always. The moment he opened the front door, he caught a scent. No one else could smell like that. My mind is playing tricks on me again, he thought. There had been many times he had mistaken strangers for Clara and chased after them, but this time it was different. That scent? He slowly lifted his head. There she was, just 4 steps away. The bag in his hand fell to the ground. His heart felt like it would burst. No words were needed. He rushed toward her and wrapped his arms around her tightly as if he would never let her go again.